Monday morning again, and most of us are going to work. We have to work to earn a living, but apart from receiving financial reward for our efforts, the sense of personal achievement and of playing a part in the society in which we live is surely important too. Mr. Dick Thatcher is a spastic, or to be more precise, an athetoid. Although most people would think that Dick is unemployable, he is on his way to work like everyone else, except that he attempts stained very early in life. He is quite liable to have more than one disability. Mr. Thatcher himself, an intelligent man, has to put up athetoid, and in common with this particular disability, suffers from a severe speech defect. Mr. Tony Gray is also intelligent, but is a right hemiplegic. Both limbs are affected on his right side, and also is deaf and dumb. Miss Rosalind Eve, apart from being a right hemiplegic, suffers from petit mal fits, is constantly under sedation, and is educationally subnormal. Miss Susan Butcher is a quadriplegic, having very little use in all four limbs, and is also mentally handicapped. Mr. David Caudry is a spastic paraplegic whose legs are paralyzed, and also has spatial perceptual difficulties. Before we see just how Mr. Thatcher and his friends cope with their individual handicaps in a work centre environment, let us first look at the problems of organizing and running a work centre. In 1957, this building was leased from the local council by the Central Middlesex Spastics Welfare Society. The members of this local group, frustrated by the lack of suitable facilities in their area, decided to provide some sort of occupation themselves. Other local groups had also started to provide occupation for adult spastics, and very often out of necessity in inadequate buildings. The workers here are lucky in that next week they will be moving into a new purpose-built work centre in Pinner. This is their new work centre, made possible by a substantial grant from the Spastic Society. The responsibility and initiative for assessing the need for a work centre is that of the Executive Committee of the local Spastics Group, and it is generally planned and organised in consultation with the Spastic Society. This committee is also responsible for stimulating the interest and support of local people and organisations. Responsible for the effective functioning of the work centre is the Management Committee, and its members must, by implication, be persons capable of constructive contribution to the process of management. This particular committee of the Croydon Group includes 2 parents of spastic persons, a number of people working in local industries, holding practical as well as managerial positions, and a member of the local authority social services department, Miss Jean Garwood, who not only started the Croydon Group, but was a founder member of the Spastic Society. The wide variety of skills provided by this group ensures a well-balanced, effective management committee. To become effective, the committee must formulate a program to provide an adequate service for the handicapped workers who attend the centre. Appointed to direct the day-to-day running and administration of the centre is the work centre manager. His appointment is an important one to the success of the centre. What sort of man should he be? He must be sensitive to the problems of his workers and be willing to concern himself with their welfare. He needs to know when a few words of encouragement or disciplinary action are necessary, when to involve parents, and when to call in the specialized knowledge of social workers and others. He should be something of a production manager. He must assess the viability of a potential job, improve workloading and quality control, and honour delivery dates for completed work, all at prices that are competitive. So too must he be something of an engineer. He must be practically minded, so that he can help to overcome, by designing and making jigs and fixtures, some of the physical problems encountered by his spastic workers. He requires an understanding of simple accountancy, seeing that ledgers and cash books, etc., are kept properly. He must also keep a watchful eye on the centre's budget, which sets the financial limits within which the service must operate. He needs to be something of a personnel officer, to select his staff carefully, and to train them to become useful and vital members of his team. And he must be something of a salesman, to negotiate for subcontract work and promote confidence that the work produced will be of high quality and delivered on time. No work centre manager, however, is perfect, and one of the important facets of management is the art of delegation. He must weld his group of adaptable and enthusiastic instructors into a team. There are relatively few handicapped young people who, on leaving school, have the ability or the capacity to go straight into normal employment. For these children, the problems of learning not only school subjects, but that of discovering what goes on outside their restrictive world, are particularly acute. Many spastics are immature for their age, and many suffer from lack of confidence. Some school leavers cannot accept their handicaps, and often feel a sense of failure because they've not reached a standard set by their parents or by themselves. They need an easier stepping-off point by way of sheltered work experience and time for social and personal adjustment. The Social Work and Employment Department of the Spastic Society organizes periodic assessment courses. During these courses, where the spastics live away from home, fully trained professional staff have the opportunity not only of assessing their physical capabilities, but also the way they behave socially. One of a group of tests carried out is to determine whether a person has spatial perceptual difficulties. This handicap is not generally one that is easily recognizable, and an intelligent man like David can appear to be quite clumsy and have a lower than average intellectual capacity. Some people manage to come to terms with their spatial defect and are able to give a false impression as to their degree of handicap. The ability to recognize letters, figures, and words, and the ability to reproduce them in proper spatial relationships is essential for reading and arithmetic. Where spatial difficulties are involved, this factor alone impedes the academic skills for spastic children, even if they have the requisite mental capacity. This problem is found to be even more acute when a child leaves school and finds it impossible to hold down a job involving basic matching and assembling of objects. Many bright people with a spatial perceptual difficulty often become distressed when they are unable to make a copy which matches the model, and the sort of expression he makes is, "Why can't I make my hands do what my eyes see?" It is not always appreciated that they have a perceptual defect, and it would seem that quite a high percentage of all spastic groups have some spatial perceptual difficulties. The practical aspect of getting up in the morning to go to a work centre, mixing socially and working besides often more experienced workers, is a good basic step from an educational to a working environment. When a person attends for interview at a work centre, it is essential to glean as much information from her as possible, even though reports from school, the Spastic Society, or the appropriate local authority may be on hand. Obviously, the physical handicap should be observed, and it should be noted whether there is any hearing, sight, or speech defect, and whether a lack of concentration is apparent. A note should be made of any history of fits suffered and the medication prescribed. By the use of washers, for instance, it may be possible to assess any spatial perceptual difficulties and coordination problems that may be present. It is also necessary to ascertain any toilet or feeding or other personal problems, and whether transport must be provided. When the time comes for showing her around the work centre, the manager will have a pretty good idea as to how well she is likely to get on with the other workers, and how she is likely to manage the work available. It is, however, only after she has had a settling down period attending the work centre that a more realistic overall picture of her capabilities and social behaviour can be assessed. It is desirable to provide as wide a variety of work as possible, so that the workers can be moved about from job to job, thereby reducing the possibility of boredom and the consequent loss of production. The most vital aspect of selecting the right kind of work to be produced in the work centre must be to consider the capabilities of the handicapped, and not, however tempting, to accept a job because it would be just financially rewarding. For instance, obtaining a job where most of the work has to be done by the instructors. Most spastics have multi-disabilities, and unless simple one-operation jobs are selected, or more complex work broken down into simple operations, there are bound to be a number of workers who will be unable to manage the work. The manager's aim is to provide jobs to keep his workers busy, and although this is seldom an easy task to fulfill, this objective must have priority over the financial implications. Work should, however, be priced on a fair commercial basis. It is all too easy for business organizations to take advantage of non-profit-making ventures. Some centers provide handicraft work, and although the financial reward is generally smaller than that of industrial work, it still can be a desirable proposition. This is particularly so when a center is some distance from an industrial town, and can also act as a buffer when for one reason or another a current subcontract job comes to an end. Another big advantage with this type of work is for those workers who have a natural creative and artistic ability, and who prefer the one-off jobs in preference to more repetitive work. Apart from handicrafts, many centres produce and market their own products. Here they are making wire coat hangers for the dry cleaning trade. Breaking the operations down into 4 simple hand-operated jigs enables even some of the most severely handicapped to be productive. Sometimes it is necessary for one worker to help another to maintain the production flow, and also to enable the more severely handicapped person to feel that he is playing his part in the team. This machine for producing wall ties, used in the building industry, was designed and developed by the manager, working in conjunction with the local technical college. The second operation, to complete the wall ties, is done by using hand-operated jigs. Wire wickets, used extensively in the polythene packaging industry, also provide a useful form of employment. This press operation is one of a number needed to produce toy kazoos, sold to local music shops. When they are finally assembled, they must be inspected, sterilized, and packed. Another useful item is reflective armbands for children. Fly presses, as we see here, are most suitable for handicapped workers, including many who are normally confined to wheelchairs. In some instances, spastics are able to produce more by the use of these machines and find the work more satisfying, particularly when they have hands that are difficult to control and would find the job of screwing a nut onto a bolt far more difficult and frustrating. This is how Mr. Dick Thatcher finds his job satisfaction. He works in the press shop and takes pride in playing his part by helping to produce wire coat hangers. Among the many parts produced by these presses are components for radar cathode ray tubes, tape recorders, Geiger counters, switchgear, the television industry, and computers. Drilling, deburring, and tapping are jobs that can quite easily be done by most spastics, enabling the centre to offer a wide assortment of skills to local industry. 12 6BA holes are tapped in this brass strip. When all the work is completed, it will become one of many thousands of buzz bars used in GPO equipment. Monel is a very hard steel, and drilling a small hole down the centre of a screw produces a great deal of friction. This contract was secured because the girls in the factory broke far more drills than the workers in this centre. This job involves the use of a small lathe, and the spastic worker is cutting away the metal casing of reject sparking plugs so that the firm can reuse the insulators. Assembly work is perhaps the widest field from which suitable work can be selected for the work centre. Even in this automated age, there are still thousands of assembly operations which are either impossible or far too expensive to automate. Tony Gray is busy assembling terminal blocks. If you walk into just about any public house, you will see these levers at the base of the whiskey and gin bottles, accurately measuring the delivery of your next drink. This assembly job is broken down into a number of operations to make the assembly line flow efficiently. These water pumps are being assembled for use in domestic washing machines. Both these operators suffer from severe fits. A car accessory firm has a continuous contract with this centre to assemble exhaust pipe brackets. Another large contract is for producing eye bolts for a local manufacturer. Packing components into cellophane, polythene or cardboard containers is the most usual form of packing work. This man is packing washers into cellophane bags. He needs a high worktop as he is partially sighted. Here is a rather unusual method of placing an ice scraper for car windscreens into a display card. A job involving several operations is the packing of typewriter eraser pads. Now the pad is enclosed in polythene by means of a heat sealer. Other types of work not shown in this film are printing, pottery, jewellery, garden furniture, and the cultivation of plants and flowers. Basically, it's what the worker accomplishes that is important, to feel that he is playing a part in the community by producing something useful. The average wage a worker can expect to earn is £1.15 per week. Some centres pay £2 per week, but are unable to pay more, as this would violate the weekly Social Security supplementary benefit. It is important to note that it is not the responsibility or the aim of the manager or the management committee to raise money or to make a profit from the work produced at the centre. Occasional visits to the work centre during working hours by members of the management committee are essential, for only in this way will they be able to plot the progress made, be properly aware of the problems involved, and provide the continuing support and advice that may be necessary. The problems of involving the more severely handicapped person in the workforce are particularly difficult. At this centre, the manager has designed a small fixture to enable a screw eye to be inserted accurately into the top of a glue cap. Without these fixtures, the job would be impossible for some of the spastics here, and would not only reduce the amount produced, but also mean that a number of the more lightly handicapped spastics would need to come off other important work to enable the centre to meet production requirements. Of course, providing the right kind of work, as the manager and his staff try to do successfully, does not prevent occasional outbursts of frustration. Frustration caused through a handicapped person feeling that she is not able to work fast enough, even though she tries hard, due to her aggravating disabilities. The frustration of doing repetitive industrial work when, if you hadn't been born a spastic, you could have been working in an office, or travelling the world, or have become a successful artist or composer. The knowledge that the chances of ever getting married and raising a family are extremely slim and often non-existent. Sexual frustration and the mere fact of realizing that one is not attractive to the opposite sex is a particularly real and difficult problem. This often leads to loss of temper, unsocial behavior, and in some cases extreme depression. It is vitally important that these problems are recognized and understood. Often these outbursts of bad behavior occur during tea breaks or lunch periods, when sitting idle can bring disturbing thoughts into one's head. Feeding can be a problem for some, and if it is necessary for a worker to be hand-fed, there is invariably a less handicapped person who will step forward to help with this task, thereby giving the staff a short break during the lunch period. After lunch, relax, either going for a walk or playing draughts, chess or cards. Most of the subcontract jobs produced, especially those of packing and assembly, release employees in industry from this necessary but time-consuming work so that they can be efficiently employed on more involved operations. It is imperative that delivery dates are honoured, for although one may be employing handicapped workers, these centres enjoy renewed contracts only because they satisfy the customer with prompt delivery, good quality work, and not out of pity. From time to time, some workers feel that they are being held back against their will, and that they should go for further training or straight into open employment. The reasons are sometimes purely financial, or mistaken ideas as to ability on the part of the spastic. Few spastics have any conception of working conditions in open employment. They have little knowledge of industrial discipline, or how their speed compares with that of a normal person. All managers are loath to lose their best workers, but some of the lightly handicapped spastics are able to progress sufficiently to enable them to seek alternative employment. After a period of from 6 months to a year or more, gaining experience and confidence in work and working with people, a worker may be good enough to try for bigger rewards. Sometimes employees themselves are able to find work, but more generally rely on the help and guidance of the Social Work and Employment Department of the Spastic Society. In conjunction with the findings of an assessment course, or on the recommendation of the work centre manager, a worker may apply for further training. There are at the moment 27 work centres for spastics in England and Wales, enabling over 700 people to take an active part in society. Several more centres are being built, but there is still the need to enlarge some existing centres and to build more. Work centres are costly units to support, and most of the running costs are provided by voluntary contributions. The more enlightened local authorities are providing better facilities than ever before, but the atmosphere still tends to be social rather than work, and often they are only able to provide for 2 or 3 days attendance per week. In many cases this is due to inadequate transport facilities, and so many spastics who live in an area where there is no work centre still have to spend some considerable time at home when they could be making more use of their talents. Within the last decade much has been achieved, but we still have a lot more to learn and to accomplish to try to have a clearer understanding of the problems a person labelled spastic has to live and work with. At the same time, we perhaps need to be reminded that many spastics tend to be preoccupied with their own problems, and it is essential that we try to help them become more independent. We need to be constantly aware of the dangers of overprotection. It is very easy, when one has transport facilities, to pick up workers from their homes, when many can be encouraged to be more independent and use public transport. The nearer a spastic person can get towards the normal pattern of life with work and social contacts, the happier, more mature, more confident, and more able to cope with day-to-day problems he will become. A person who is handicapped needs to feel that he too is a useful citizen, the right to work, to achieve fulfillment, a sense of pride, another day's work completed.